Hello and welcome. I'm Sam Califer, your host for Vision, the show all about the College of Arts and Sciences. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jarrod Moss, Professor and Interim Department Head of the Department of Psychology. He's here to tell me all about the new Applied Neuroscience minor available here at Mississippi State. So Jarrod, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on and talk about this new minor. I think that's a very exciting option for students. But to start, I was hoping you could just tell me a bit about yourself. What do you study, and how did you come to do so here at Mississippi State?
Sure. So I study how people kind of learn and solve problems, and is learning really broadly defined. It includes things like how you effectively comprehend when you read a textbook, or something as simple as like how do you remember like which key press we've associated with an image. The kind of commonality there is like people use different learning strategies, and those strategies vary in their effectiveness. So if you're a student, and you're studying, most likely you're rereading your textbook. That's actually one of the worst things. It's better than doing nothing.
Right.
But there are way more effective ways you do about that, do that kind of learning process. And so when I first got here to MSU in 2008, I was looking at kind of the cognitive neuroscience of like what makes a reading strategy effective.
Sure.
And so we were doing like neuroimaging, looking at like the kinds of brain areas that activate when you do a really effective strategy versus the areas that light up when you do rereading a textbook,
yeah.
Right? And they're very different areas, and so that's kind of broadly what I've studied, and kind of got here because of the kind of neuroscience work that was going on at the time.
Yeah, very interesting. I think that's something cool about neuroscience is it can go a lot of different directions, but that's super practical. It's like learning and what's actually going on in your brain. Like the memory retrieval, I think is something going on there. And so, yeah, very cool that you study that, and there's kind of a lot of people across the university who are interested in the brain and neuroscience, and so this has been a long process, I think.
Right.
And so I wanted to talk about that. What was it like to get this new minor up and running, and who did you work with on campus? Who all was involved to get this big project done?
Sure. I mean, to some degree, it goes back many years, and since that. I've lost track of time now, but somewhere in the 2010-2012 range,
Sure.
we developed a cognitive neuroscience course in psychology. We had an existing kind of behavioral neuroscience course we call biological psychology. Dr. John Bickel got here a couple years after I did, and started up his honors neuroscience class, and he does the philosophy of neuroscience. And he's been pushing for some kind of neuroscience focus on campus for a good while now.
Yeah.
And so last December, Adam Jones is, Dr. Adam Jones is a computer scientist.
Sure.
He was actually a student in the first class I taught here at the state back in 2008. But we got together, he got together with me and Dr. Michael Pratt, and started to put together some ideas for this neuroscience minor, what it would look like, and do we have enough courses on campus. And we had an initial meeting, I think it was around December of 2023, and then had subsequent meetings with other groups of professors in kinesiology. I've lost track of all the people
Like
that kind
bioengineering.
Bioengineering,
maybe.
exactly.
Yeah.
And just trying to kind of figure out what courses are being taught. And there's actually a fair number of these courses that were already being taught on campus.
Right.
One of the things that was critical is kind of creating this Intro to Neuroscience course that that Dr. Bickel is currently teaching this semester, and it's a cross-listed kind of biology psychology course. And so we went pretty quickly, and Adam Jones was the one kind of leading the way and kind of proposing the minor, and we got the the course paperwork in and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah.
But no, once it came together pretty quickly, and I think we'll have our first student graduating with the minor this coming spring.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's so awesome. Yeah, I wanted to get to talk about that because I know it's housed in psychology, and y'all will do a lot, but it takes a village to get something big like that, and things can move slowly at the university, but there's a reason there's so many steps in place, and to make sure that it's as good as it can be. but it is a big accomplishment. And so, congrats. And I know everyone else who was involved, good job to them as well. But we want to hear about what the students can expect. So there's people enrolling in these classes already, but maybe there's someone listening who's interested. What kind of classes will they take, and what kind of skills would they pick up?
Sure. So the way the minor is built, there's a couple of core classes you have to take. So the first core class you have to choose between kind of our behavioral neuroscience class called biological psychology, and or the Intro to Neuroscience class, which is the new course that we developed for the minor. The second set is kind of integrating our understanding of psychology with neuroscience, and so that includes courses like our cognitive neuroscience class, a cognitive psychology course, or our sensation perception course. And so those are all also in psychology, but have a kind of heavy neuroscience component. And then there's electives, and that's, I think, where it becomes kind of a choose your own adventure of like courses from bioengineering, biology, psychology, computer science, kinesiology. There's probably one or two I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But there's some really neat courses in there that we didn't even know, all of us didn't know existed, and so now they're there in one place for students to look at. And in terms of the skills, so I'll give the example of a course that Dr. Jones is teaching, I think in the spring. There's a kind of special topics like brain-computer interface course. And so students get like hands-on experience with kind of some mostly 3D printed kind of electroencephalograph sets that you can use to kind of do some basic computer controls and stuff like that. And so that'll be a really fun course, I think, for students to take in the spring. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, and I like that was the example you gave, because you said bioengineering, chemistry, like computer science. And I think people might know that psychology, there's a lot of overlap with neuroscience. Y'all are studying kind of a different aspect. Psychology is not as hard science, and neuroscience brings that kind of stuff into it. But how would someone in computer science or chemistry or one of those majors that people don't expect, how did that overlap with a neuroscience minor?
Sure. I mean, it's actually there's an interesting history in terms of psychology and computer science. Like cognitive psychology from the 1950s was kind of born from this looking at the first artificial intelligence systems. Oh wait, we can actually program somewhat intelligent computers. Of course, that's way different now, but and so if we can understand those, maybe we can also understand how people are. So it gave us a kind of framework, like maybe the brain is like a computer. It's not, but that's okay. There's been this interesting interplay between those two fields for a long time, and I think we're at another convergence period with the kind of large language models, AI, and kind of how they are different to or similar from our own human brain and cognition. And so I think that's where an area of overlap really exists right now for the computer science students. And so we have a number of we have some psychology courses and some neuroscience courses actually that are, part of the kind of concentrations in computer science. As well. And so they oftentimes, take our cognitive psychology or our cognitive science course, and then, we have some neuroscience components there, but then they could kind of branch out from there, and, taking a few more courses could, pick up the neuroscience minor.
Yeah, and I think, like something like a computer science degree, that's going to be good, and they can go get whatever job they want. But I think that neuroscience minor makes them stand out, and it kind of lets them, if they are interested in that, they would be more competitive in some kind of job like that. So it's that specialty that I think would make them stand out. Very interesting. We talked about this a little bit because I got to interview you during the podcast. So like, say someone, they graduate, they have this minor, how do you think it would help them towards their achievements, regardless of what they are? So either academically, professionally, or personally, how do you think this would help them?
Sure. I mean, the academic side, right? The kind of question of how we think and how our kind of mind exists in the human brain is just one of those fundamentally fascinating scientific questions we don't really understand. Of course, I'm biased as a cognitive psychologist, but. So I think a lot of students are really interested in the kind of in that aspect of neuroscience, and it's what we call cognitive neuroscience. Is like how does how does our thought processes, how are they actually implemented in the underlying kind of neural architecture of the brain? But beyond that, I think there are a lot of areas like we talked about computer science and, in terms of brain-computer interfaces, or if you're going to kind of medical school, like there's work on kind of like neurorehabilitation and these kinds of things. And so I think the minor kind of adds this level of, you've taken these courses and concentrated in this area, and you have some extra, potentially some skills or knowledge. But even if you zoom out even more broadly, when we started talking about kind of just like understanding how our mind and brain works, helps us understand why it may be more effective to do something like explain to your friend the textbook chapter you just read as opposed to rereading it, right? And so you can take advantage of that information, even if you're going, to a different job when you want to learn things more quickly, because that gives you an advantage. Understanding how your brain works, I think will give you an advantage there.
Yeah, and you said something like that in the podcast, and I really appreciated that answer. It's like, yes, you will be more competitive. Yes, it might help you go to med school, but a big part of college is just that self-improvement and learning about the world and yourself. And so kind of regardless of what those goals are afterwards, I think it's worth it to learn it on its own, for its own sake. Because just like you said, I might be biased, but I took some psychology classes, and I feel like it helped me. I took an abnormal psych,
right?
And then I'm young at that point. I'm like 20. Now I'm like 32. When you're really starting to see the people around you might have mental health issues, and you can see them and understand people around you. So I just appreciate that answer. I think people should take it for professional reasons and academic reasons, but just it's good to follow what you like and to learn about it for its own sake.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Great conversation, and thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Vision. We'll see you next time.